The last talk for today is delivered by the keynote speaker, Mr. Madhavan Arun, Program Head, International Center for Free and Open Source Software. The title of the talk is Free Software as Driver for Innovation, Experiences from India.
Good afternoon, friends. My presentation is about innovation and how free software is helping the developing world to innovate, and some experience we have from Kerala, which is in the south of India. And I think we have a very long history of relation with Oman. So, what is innovation? Because people use this word very liberally, but what do we really mean when we talk about innovation? So for this presentation, I go by the definition of innovation, which an Austrian economist, Joseph Schumpeter, has talked about innovation. He talks about innovation as new products, discovery of new product, discovery of new processes with which you create a product, or a new market for an existing product, or it is about newness. And when you talk about newness, it is highly contextual. New to where? Is it new to the world? Is it new to the region? Is it new to a firm or new to an individual? All this can be innovation. And if we start looking at innovation in this manner as a change or a newness that has come in certain context, then we have to consider some of the specificities of innovation in the developing world context. And that brings us to this concept of catching up. So there are regions which are on the frontier of the technology, and there are regions which are not in the frontier and trying to catch up with the frontier. So the technological catching up process, which is again bringing new, but the new in the context of the region, not to the frontier, it's a very different process from pushing the frontier. And in the developing world, I think most will be focusing more on catching up with the frontier rather than the pushing the frontier aspect. So there are two key challenges in this process of catching up. One is learning the new technologies, the technologies as it is practiced in the frontier. And the second one, a little bit more tricky, that is the social technologies which are associated with this hard technology, how the society deals with this technology and how the institutions around these technologies are coming into existence. For example, patents as a legal instrument or institution is very critical on, say, pharmaceutical industry, which will have very different effect on another industry. So these kind of social infrastructure and institution will also need to be learned and created if we have to operate in certain sphere of technology. So we need to learn both of this. So how did the regions which are lagging in the technology caught up and moved forward? Sometimes the lagging regions are now in the frontier and pushing the frontiers. So how do the regions build this kind of capability? So when we look at our past history, we find that the people moving across the region is a very, very important source of knowledge flow from a frontier to a region in lagging behind. And there are many examples of this kind of knowledge flow. And over the period of time, these processes have changed. But one very important aspect of this knowledge flow and learning is the role of the state, how the governments, what role the government plays in this process of catching up. And what are the strategies which the governments had done in the past, and what are the new challenges? So one very important strategy which has been operational traditionally is the protection given to the local firms. You incubate firms locally, give them some incentive, protect them from global competition so that they grow. But now the new globalized world limits our possibilities because there are many restrictions in terms of free trade where you cannot differentiate between the local firm and a global competitor from the frontier. So, and then there are issues like the strong patent and copyright regimes, because weak copyright regime and patent regimes are sometimes quite essential for regions lagging behind in building the capability. So, but with the new global legal regimes, these are becoming difficult. So, I just want to briefly mention some of the experiences of Indian state in technological catching up. So, Indian pharma industry is very well known, and they produce even for the global market. But when India became independent, there was no capability in India to make most of the medicines it required. But the Indian state had the will. And so what the state did was, one, state created a demand. State decided that we are going to vaccinate, provide vaccine and antibiotic to the entire population, which created a demand. At the same time, state helped new firms to come up, which can produce these medicines. And the Cold War at that point of time helped a little bit by making the technology available from one of the parties in the Cold War, primarily the Soviet Union. So they gained the technology from this old Soviet region and started producing medicines locally in the country. And slowly, it created a large ecosystem of pharmaceutical producers in the country. And the state also changed the patent system. From a product-based patenting system, the state changed the patenting model to a process patent, where you cannot patent a product, you can only patent a process of how to make that product. And this helped firms to find out new ways of making the same product and thereby start becoming an active producer. So, slowly, the local capability started growing, and now we have some of the leading global pharmaceutical companies coming from India. Same thing happened with the petrochemical industry also. From zero capability, the state has the Indian private companies now have a lot of capability in petroleum refining. And again, if you look at software, it is the same thing. The Indian software industry emerged primarily from two state demand. One was the Indian state adopted this 5-year planning process, and it required processing large volume of data about the citizen, and they created the infrastructure. The Indian state decided to create an infrastructure for this data collection and processing. Naturally, they wanted computers. They started building computers. They needed the software. They started building the software. So, and parallelly, there was an effort in the nuclear research, which also required the computing. And that's how the Indian computing started, not by any private companies coming in and starting the software export. So this created a talent pool, the Indian state's intervention. And then another major intervention was in 80s, where the Indian government decided to bring Unix operating system and computing to all the banks in India. All the banks were nationalized at that point of time under the control of the government. Again, created a lot of demand for software. And because of the talent pool created earlier, around, again, the state demand expanded, and firms also started coming in. By the time of the Unix and banking computerization period, we had private software firms. And it is in this context free software plays a new role, because with the new copyright regimes and global trade mechanisms, it is very easy for a firm outside the country to make a product and come and sell it here. And the access to knowledge is often limited through copyrights and patents, and free software gives us a lot of new opportunities to access the knowledge around computing. So just to give some of our experience, I will just give a brief outline of some of the projects in free software and how that has helped the local economy. Okay, so the first major project which we did in free software was migrating all our schools to free software. So we now have something like 6 million children learning free software every academic year. And all the schools in Kerala now runs on free software. And we've trained around 90,000 school teachers, around 2 lakh school teachers, and 90,000 machines are running free software across the state. And this was an initiative which was started in 2004, and that was led primarily by the school teachers. So the entire infrastructure is operated and managed by the school teachers, who may be teaching science, social science, languages, whatever it may be. There is no technologist involved. They do it all themselves. So it started in small way in 2009, then slowly expanded. In the process, we found that local software service industry started gaining capabilities around free software. We have small local IT vendors which provides support on free software, installation, troubleshooting, all those things. It's like a cottage industry kind of thing, because there is a huge demand from the state in the school system. And this, now we have a distribution, educational school distribution, managed by the school teachers, developed and managed by the school teachers. So they developed substantial capability in-house. And an estimate in 2009 shows that the state gained something like 10 million US dollars at that point of time, 2009. And the project is continuing ever since, and the total gain would have been substantial in economic terms. But much more than the economic terms, the indirect result, like the human capacity in free software, which is very, very important. Another major project is the power utility company in this, of Kerala, which address something like 12 million users. The staff of the power utility company decided that they will abandon the proprietary software systems they were using until that point of time and move the entire system to free software. And together they worked out the entire solution. Most of them were not having substantial software development expertise, but they started learning free software technology, and now the entire system is controlled by them. And they now operate their own data centers. Entire application is by them, and substantial benefit in terms of the operational capabilities as well as financial benefits. So now they are working into spatial data information systems on their own and expanding it. And the experience of the power utility company led to other government agencies also moving in to free software. So these migrations also had the spin-off effect. We now have one of the world's largest Drupal contributors from the region, because the government was using Drupal in big way for their content management requirement. So a local firm came up, and now they are catering to the global requirements, and they're major contributors to the Drupal. And similarly, local firms and contributors emerged in other free software systems like Odoo, which is a free software ERP solution, Typo3, another content management system, etc. So some years back, we did a survey on how does the free software impact the local software support and service ecosystem. And we find that 70% of our software firms depend heavily on free software for their services. They leverage on some existing free software platform and provide service based on that even to a global consumer base. And in the process, they also contribute to some of the projects. So this manner, the role of free software in the economy is also in the software business industry in the state is also to be recognized. So the point I want to emphasize is the state. The state has a crucial role to play in building the local capacity and local economy. And the state should be using its power as a demand generator to build this local capability. And it is only the state which can do this, because state is the major consumer of the technology. And if the state can effectively target it, then a local economy around free software can be created. And the public research also has a very important role to play in this process, facilitate building the human capacity as well as helping the state in this process. But the real risk taker and the leader here will be the state. So in this presentation, I was emphasizing on the technological capability building and economy, but I think there is something much more important for the state, because a state need to protect its citizen and its sovereignty, and taking control of the information infrastructure is a very important step, and the free software is the only way for the state to achieve that. So thank you.